They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but in the world of high-stakes finance, it's best served with a liquidation notice. Bennett Smith thought he had it all figured out. He was the CEO of the decade the man on the cover of Forbes, and the husband who decided his wife, Victoria, was past her expiration date. He served her divorce papers on Christmas Eve, thinking he was discarding a simple housewife. He didn't know that the hand rocking the cradle was also the hand holding the leash to his entire empire. He thought he was free. He was actually about to meet his new boss. This is the story of how a trophy wife checkmated a tyrant without saying a word. The snow in Aspen didn't fall. It curated itself. It dusted the slate roof of the Smith chalet with the precision of a powdered sugar sifter, ensuring the multi-million-dollar estate looked exactly like the Christmas card Bennett Smith had paid a PR firm $30,000 to design. Inside, the air smelled of Fraser fir, expensive scotch, and the distinct metallic scent of tension. Victoria Smith stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, watching the valet park a line of Bentleys and Aston Martins. She adjusted the diamond tennis bracelet on her wrist, a gift from Bennett 3 years ago, or perhaps 4. She couldn't remember. It didn't matter. It was just an asset, something insured and itemized much like herself. Victoria. Bennett's voice cut through the ambient jazz. She turned. Bennett was handsome in that predator way, silver at the temples, a jawline that could cut glass and eyes that always seemed to be appraising the depreciation value of whoever he was looking at. He wasn't looking at her face. He was looking at his watch. "Guests will be here in 20 minutes, Victoria said, her voice smooth, practiced. "The caterers are set up in the West Wing. Is the mood lighting to your satisfaction?" "The lighting is fine," Bennett said, walking over to the mahogany desk in the corner of the room. He picked up a thick, cream-colored envelope. It wasn't a holiday card. It was sealed with red wax, but it lacked the festive stamp. "We need to talk. Briefly." Victoria felt a cold prickle at the base of her neck. Now the board of directors will be walking through that door any minute. The merger with Kincaid Systems depends on tonight going smoothly. "Exactly," Bennett said. He extended the envelope toward her. "Which is why we need to get the housekeeping out of the way." Victoria took the envelope. It was heavy. "What is this?" "I filed this morning," Bennett said, taking a sip of his scotch. He didn't look guilty. He looked relieved, like a man who had finally closed a deal that had been dragging on too long. "Divorce papers, irreconcilable differences. I'm being generous, Victoria. You get the townhouse in Connecticut, the Audi, and a monthly stipend that will keep you comfortable. But I want you out of the Aspen house by tomorrow morning." The room went silent. The crackling fire suddenly sounded like gunfire. "Christmas Eve," Victoria whispered. She looked down at the envelope, her fingers trembling slightly. "You're doing this on Christmas Eve. It's the end of the fiscal year." Bennett shrugged, checking his reflection in the window. "Clean break for the new quarter. It makes sense for tax purposes." Tax purposes. Their 18-year marriage, the years she spent editing his speeches, charming his investors, nursing him through his ulcers and his panic attacks when Smith Dynamics was nothing but a garage startup. It was all being liquidated for tax purposes. "Is it Chloe?" Victoria asked. She didn't scream. She didn't throw a vase. She just asked. Bennett paused. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face. "Chloe is a vital part of my marketing team. She understands the future of this company. She understands me. You, Victoria. Let's be honest. You've been happy playing the housewife. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. You don't understand the world I live in." Victoria looked at him, really looked at him. She saw the arrogance that had grown over his skin like a callus. He truly believed she was nothing more than a decoration. He believed the narrative he had told his friends, that Victoria was the lucky girl he'd plucked from obscurity, the simple woman who baked cookies while he conquered the world. He had forgotten. He had forgotten that before she was Victoria Smith, the hostess, she was Victoria Vance, the chaotic variable. He had forgotten who proofread his first business plan. He had forgotten who told him to buy into lithium futures 10 years ago. "You want me to leave tomorrow?" Victoria asked, her voice dropping an octave. "Yes, you can stay in the guest wing tonight. Just smile for the party. Don't make a scene. The Kincaid investors are watching." Bennett checked his watch again. "I have to take a call. Read the papers. Sign them. Don't fight it, Tory. Arthur drafted them. You can't win against Arthur." Arthur Penhaligon, the shark of Wall Street. Bennett's bulldog. Bennett turned his back on her and walked out of the room, tapping on his phone. Victoria stood alone in the cavernous living room. She looked at the red wax seal. She didn't open the envelope. She didn't need to read the terms to know they were insulting. She walked over to the fire. For a second, she considered throwing the envelope into the flames. It would be dramatic. It would be satisfying. But Victoria didn't do dramatic. She did effective. She walked to the side table, picked up her phone, and dialed a number that wasn't saved in her contacts list. She knew it by heart. It rang twice. "This is the office of Mr. Blackwood," a crisp British voice answered. "We are currently closed for the holiday." "Tell Silas it's the Sphinx," Victoria said, her voice ice cold. "Tell him to initiate Protocol Omega, and tell him I want to buy a debt." There was a pause on the other end, a distinct shift in tone. "The Sphinx, 1 moment, please." Victoria looked out the window at the snow. Bennett wanted a clean break for the new quarter. He wanted to focus on the Kincaid merger. "Merry Christmas, Bennett," she whispered to the empty room. "I hope you kept the receipt for your company." The party was a masquerade in more ways than one. 2 hours later, the Smith chalet was packed with the elite of the tech world. Men in Italian suits discussed algorithms and IPOs, while women in couture sipped champagne and discussed their vacations in St. Bart's. Bennett was in his element. He stood by the fireplace, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a crystal tumbler. Clinging to his arm discreetly but possessively was Chloe de Winter. Chloe was 26, sharp and hungry. She wore a dress that was slightly too bold for a company Christmas party, a shimmering emerald backless number that screamed for attention. She looked at Bennett with adoration, but her eyes were scanning the room, calculating who was important and who was irrelevant. "Bennett, darling," Chloe purred, leaning in close. "Is she handled?" Bennett smirked, taking a sip of his drink. "Done. Handed her the papers an hour ago. She's probably upstairs crying into a pillow. It's better this way. She was holding me back, Chloe. You know that. She's too domestic. I just worry she'll try to take half," Chloe said, her eyes narrowing. "Smith Dynamics is about to explode with the Kincaid deal. You can't let her touch your equity." "Please," Bennett scoffed. "Victoria doesn't know what equity is. She thinks a bond is something you have with a dog. Besides, the prenup was ironclad, and Arthur has structured my assets so they're untouchable. She'll take the house in Connecticut and disappear. She's not a fighter." Across the room, standing near the grand piano, Victoria was not crying. She was wearing a midnight blue velvet gown that she had bought for this specific occasion. It was conservative, elegant, and regal. She was smiling, nodding as the CFO of a rival company complained about the interest rates, but her mind was elsewhere. She was cataloguing. Asset 1, the Aspen House, title held under a shell company, Blue Ridge LLC. Asset 2, the Smith Dynamics majority share. Bennett held 51%, or he thought he did. Asset 3, the Kincaid deal, the merger that would value the company at $4 billion. Bennett needed the Kincaid Group's capital to keep the company afloat. What nobody at this party knew, what even Bennett refused to admit, was that Smith Dynamics was bleeding cash. They had overinvested in a failed AI project last year. They were liquid. If the Kincaid deal fell through, Bennett would be insolvent by February. Victoria excused herself from the CFO and glided toward the bar. She needed to make an exit, but not a quiet one. She needed to set the stage. She saw Arthur Penhaligon, Bennett's lawyer, eating a shrimp cocktail near the kitchen. Arthur was a short, stout man who looked like a bulldog in a bow tie. He had drafted the divorce papers. Arthur, Victoria said, appearing beside him. Arthur jumped, nearly dropping his shrimp. Victoria, Merry Christmas. Lovely party. I read the papers, Arthur. She lied. Arthur coughed. Ah. Yes, well, Bennett instructed me to be swift. It's a standard separation agreement, Victoria. Very generous, considering. Standard, Victoria repeated. She leaned in closer. Tell me, Arthur, did you check the disclosure forms on the blind trust Bennett set up in the Caymans in 2018? The one labeled Project Icarus. Arthur's face went pale. The blood drained out of him so fast he looked like a wax figure. I'm not sure what you're referring to. That's privileged information. It's not privileged if it was funded with joint marital assets before the separation date, Victoria said pleasantly. And it's certainly not privileged if the IRS finds out about the misappropriated funds. Arthur choked. Victoria, you shouldn't be making accusations. I'm not making accusations, Arthur. I'm making a forecast. You know I have a knack for predicting market crashes. She patted him on the shoulder. Enjoy the shrimp. I hear it's fresh. She walked away, leaving the lawyer sweating in the air-conditioned room. First strike landed. Victoria made her way to the center of the room. She caught Bennett's eye. He looked surprised to see her down here, surprised she wasn't weeping upstairs. He stiffened, waiting for her to make a scene. He gripped Chloe's arm. Victoria didn't approach him. Instead, she walked to the microphone stand where the jazz band was taking a break. She tapped the mic. The feedback whined, silencing the room. "Excuse me, everyone," Victoria said. Her voice was steady, projecting the perfect hostess warmth. Bennett's eyes widened. He started to move toward her, panic flaring in his chest. "Don't do it," his eyes pleaded. "Don't embarrass me." "I just wanted to thank you all for coming," Victoria said, smiling at the crowd. "Christmas is a time for new beginnings, for clarity, and for recognizing the things that truly matter." She locked eyes with Bennett. "My husband has always been a man of great ambition. He chases the future with a hunger that is truly inspiring. Tonight, on Christmas Eve, he gave me a gift that I will cherish forever." The room went silent. Chloe looked confused. Bennett stopped moving, unsure if this was a compliment or a grenade. "He gave me my freedom," Victoria said. A ripple of confused murmurs went through the crowd. "We will be parting ways," Victoria continued, her voice light, almost joyful. "And as I leave this beautiful home tomorrow, I want to wish Bennett and his team the best of luck with the Kincaid merger. I have a feeling you're going to need it." She stepped back from the mic. "Enjoy the party. I believe the champagne is on the house. For now." She turned and walked out of the room. The silence she left behind was heavy, suffocating. She didn't look back as she ascended the grand staircase. Bennett stood frozen. People were staring at him. He forced a laugh, a loud barking sound. She's had a bit too much wine." Emotional times. Let's get the band back on." But the mood was broken. Up in the master bedroom, Victoria packed a single suitcase. She didn't take the jewelry. She didn't take the designer clothes Bennett had bought her. She took her laptop, a hard drive she kept in the back of the safe, and an old, battered notebook she had owned since college. She walked out of the chalet into the snowy night. A black sedan was waiting for her at the bottom of the driveway. It wasn't the Uber she was supposed to call. It was a Rolls-Royce Phantom. The driver, a massive man with a scar on his cheek, opened the door. "Good evening, Miss Vance. Mr. Blackwood sends his regards." "Hello, Silas," Victoria said, sliding into the leather interior. "Take me to the airport, the private hangar." "Destination?" Victoria looked back at the chalet, glowing warmly against the dark mountain. "New York," she said. "We have a board meeting to prepare for." "Which board, ma'am?" Victoria smiled. It was the first real smile she had worn in years. "The Helios Trust," she said. "It's time the biggest investor in Smith Dynamics introduced herself to the CEO." The offices of the Helios Trust did not look like a bank. They looked like a fortress disguised as a gallery. Located on the 40th floor of a nondescript building in Hudson Yards, the space was all polished, concrete, abstract art and silence. Victoria walked out of the private elevator at 7 a.m. on Christmas morning. She wasn't wearing the velvet gown anymore. She was dressed in a sharp charcoal suit, her hair pulled back in a severe, no-nonsense bun. Silas walked a step behind her. "The team is assembled in the war room, ma'am," Silas said. "We've pulled the overnight analytics on Smith Dynamics." "Good," Victoria said. She pushed open the double glass doors. Inside, 6 people were sitting around a holographic conference table. These weren't bankers. They were the sharks Victoria had hand-picked over the last decade. A forensic accountant, a former SEC regulator, and 3 quantitative analysts who could spot a market dip before it happened. They all stood up when she entered. "Merry Christmas, everyone," Victoria said, taking her seat at the head of the table. "I apologize for calling you in on a holiday, but we have a hostile takeover to manage." "We live for this, Victoria," said David, her lead analyst. He was a young man with messy hair who had made his first million shorting airline stocks at 19. "Besides, watching Bennett Smith implode is better than opening presents." "Status report," Victoria commanded. David tapped his tablet. A large chart appeared on the screen. "Bennett is leveraging everything on the Kincaid merger. He's counting on a $200 million injection from the Helios Trust to sweeten the pot for Kincaid. He thinks we're a salient, passive partner. He thinks we're just a rubber stamp. He has no idea who owns Helios," the former SEC regulator asked. "None," Victoria said, a small smile playing on her lips. "When I started investing my allowance 10 years ago, I used 3 layers of shell companies. Bennett was too busy chasing press coverage to look at the cap table. He was happy to take the money from Helios because we never asked questions. We just signed checks. Until today," Silas rumbled from the corner. "Until today," Victoria agreed. "Bennett thinks I'm a liability he just shed. He doesn't realize that Helios holds 30% of his company's debt and controls the pivotal voting block for the merger. She looked at the screen, showing Bennett's stock price. "He wants to play the big man," Victoria said softly. "He wants to treat people like assets. Let's show him what happens when an asset defaults." Meanwhile, in Aspen, Bennett woke up with a headache that felt like a drill press. The sunlight reflecting off the snow was blinding. He rolled over. Chloe was scrolling through her phone, looking displeased. "Merry Christmas, baby." Bennett groaned. "Don't Merry Christmas me," Chloe snapped. "Have you seen Twitter?" Bennett sat up, squinting. "What, why?" "Victoria," she said, shoving the phone in his face. "Her little speech last night. Someone recorded it. It's trending. #TheFirstWifeClub. People are saying she left with class and you looked like a deer in headlights." "It'll blow over." Bennett waved his hand dismissively. "Who cares what the internet thinks? The only opinion that matters is Kincaid's." He got out of bed, grabbing his silk robe. "I'm going to call James Kincaid. Wish him a happy holiday, smooth over any doubts." He walked out to the balcony, the cold air bracing him. He dialed James Kincaid, the CEO of the company he was trying to merge with. "Bennett," James's voice was booming but guarded. "Merry Christmas. I saw the video. Dramatic night. You know how it is, James." Bennett laughed, though it sounded hollow. "Emotions run high. But I'm focused. I'm ready to sign the papers on the 26th. Are we still on track?" There was a long pause on the other end. "Actually, Bennett, that's why I'm glad you called. My legal team got a notification this morning from your primary investor, the Helios Trust." Bennett frowned. "Helios. They're silent partners. They never get involved." "Well, they're involved now," James said. "They've filed a formal motion to pause the merger. They're citing concerns regarding executive stability and undisclosed financial liabilities. They've frozen the liquidity line, Bennett. Without their vote and without their cash, I can't move forward." Bennett felt the blood leave his face. "That's impossible. I know the guys at Helios. I'll call them. It's a clerical error." "Fix it, Bennett," James said, his voice turning cold. "You have 48 hours, or I walk away and I take my offer to your competitor Orion Tech." The line went dead. Bennett stared at the phone. His hands were shaking. If Kincaid walked Smith, Dynamics wasn't just stagnant. It was dead. He had borrowed against the company's future to fund his lifestyle and the new R&D facility. Without the buyout, the banks would call his loans. He stormed back into the bedroom. "Get Arthur on the phone," he yelled at Chloe, "and get the contact number for the Helios Trust. Now." "I thought you said they were silent," Chloe shrieked. "They are supposed to be," Bennett roared, throwing a vase against the wall. "Someone is messing with me, and I'm going to kill them." He dialed the number for Helios. It rang once. "Helios Trust Executive Office," a calm British voice answered. "This is Bennett Smith, CEO of Smith Dynamics. I demand to speak to the director. Now. You people are blocking a $4 billion deal." "Mr. Smith," the voice said coolly, "the director is aware of your situation. They are willing to meet with you." "Good. Put them on the phone." "The director prefers face-to-face meetings for matters of this gravity. They are in the New York headquarters. Can you be here by 9 a.m. tomorrow?" "I'm in Aspen," Bennett yelled. "It's Christmas." "Then I suggest you fuel up your jet, Mr. Smith. The offer to meet expires at 9:01 a.m. The line clicked off. Bennett stood there, his chest heaving. He looked at Chloe, who was looking at him with fear. Not love. Fear. She was smelling the weakness on him. "Pack your bags," Bennett spat. "We're going to New York." The flight to New York was a nightmare. Bennett spent the entire 5 hours pacing the narrow aisle of his Gulf Stream, screaming at Arthur Penhaligon over the satellite phone. Who owns them? Arthur. Who owns Helios? I don't know, Arthur wailed on the other end. It's a blind trust nestled inside a holding company in Singapore. It's airtight. I told you 5 years ago not to take money from a source we couldn't vet. I took it because the interest rate was 0, Bennett screamed. Find out who sits on that chair. By the time Bennett's limousine pulled up to the Hudson Yards Tower the next morning, he looked haggard. He hadn't shaved. His eyes were bloodshot. He told Chloe to wait in the car. He didn't want her witnessing him begging. He marched into the lobby. Security was expecting him. They ushered him into the elevator without a word. He didn't even have to show ID. They knew who he was. The elevator ride to the 40th floor felt like it took a year. Bennett rehearsed his speech. He would threaten them. He would sue them. Then, if that didn't work, he would charm them. He was Bennett Smith. He could sell ice to an Eskimo. The doors opened. Silas stood there, arms crossed, looking like a granite statue in a suit. Mr. Smith. Silas nodded. Right this way. Bennett brushed past him, adjusting his tie. Where is he, your boss? The director is in the boardroom, Silas said. They walked down a long glass corridor. Bennett could see the Manhattan skyline, grey and old. Silas opened the heavy oak doors to the boardroom. The room was dimly lit. A long table stretched out before him. At the far end, a high-backed leather chair faced the window, looking out at the city. Bennett stormed in. Listen to me, he started, his voice booming. I don't know what game you're playing, but you are messing with the wrong man. I have lawyers who will dismantle this fund piece by piece. You can't block the Kincaid deal without cause. The chair didn't move. Are you listening to me? Bennett slammed his hand on the table. I am the CEO of Smith Dynamics. I built that company from nothing. I demand you release the funds and approve the merger. Slowly, the chair began to swivel. You didn't build it from nothing, Bennett, a voice said. Bennett froze. The voice. It was familiar. But it was wrong. It didn't belong in this room. It belonged in a kitchen. It belonged in a bedroom. The chair finished turning. Victoria sat there. She was wearing a white suit that looked sharp enough to cut skin. Her hands were clasped on the table in front of her. She looked powerful. She looked terrifying. Bennett blinked. He literally rubbed his eyes. Victoria, he choked out. A nervous laugh escaped him. Victoria, what? What are you doing here? Did you follow me? How did you get in here? He looked around for security. Is this a joke, Victoria, you need to leave? I have a meeting with the director of the Helios Trust. Victoria didn't smile. She didn't blink. She just stared at him with eyes that were ancient and cold. Sit down, Bennett, she said. I'm not sitting down, he shouted, his face turning red. Get out of that chair. You're embarrassing yourself. Stalking me to my business meetings. This is pathetic, even for you. I said sit down. Victoria pressed a button on the table. The blinds on the windows snapped shut, plunging the room into artificial light. A massive screen behind her illuminated. It displayed the organizational chart of the Helios Trust. At the top, where the director's name should be, it read V. Smith. Bennett stared at the screen. He read it once, twice on. His brain refused to process the data. "No," he whispered. "No, that's impossible. You're a housewife. You arrange flowers. You didn't even want a prenup." "I didn't want a prenup because I knew my assets were already protected in offshore trusts you couldn't touch," Victoria said calmly. "And I didn't arrange flowers, Bennett. I managed your life. And while you were busy buying sports cars and flirting with your assistants, I was investing. I was building." She stood up slowly. "I founded Helios 10 years ago with the money my grandmother left me. You thought I spent it on charity galas. I used it to buy your debt." Bennett collapsed into the nearest chair. His legs gave out. You own the debt. I own 30% of Smith Dynamics' operating debt," Victoria corrected, "and I own 12% of the voting shares through proxies, which means, Bennett, I am your boss." Bennett sat there, mouth agape. The power dynamic in the room shifted so violently, the air pressure seemed to drop. "Why?" he whispered. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I loved you," Victoria said. For a second, her voice softened just a fraction. "I wanted you to succeed. I used my money to prop you up when no one else would. When the banks turned you down in 2019. Who do you think gave you that bridge loan? It was me. I wanted us to build an empire together." Her face hardened again. "But then you got iod, you got arrogant, and on Christmas Eve you decided I was disposable." She tossed a file onto the table. It slid across the polished wood and stopped right in front of him. "The Kincaid deal is dead, Bennett. I vetoed it this morning." "You can't," Bennett gasped. "If that deal dies, the company goes under. I'll be ruined." "The company won't go under," Victoria said. "But you will." She leaned forward, placing her palms on the table. "Here are my terms. You wanted a divorce. You've got one. But the settlement has changed." "I have a lawyer," Bennett stammered, trying to regain some ground. "Arthur won't let you. Arthur is currently being investigated by the Bar Association for ethics violations regarding the blind trust disclosure," Victoria said. "I tipped them off an hour ago. Arthur is busy." Bennett looked like he was going to vomit. "The terms," Victoria continued. "You will resign as CEO of Smith Dynamics effective immediately. You will transfer your voting shares to the Helios Trust. In exchange, I will not trigger the default clause on your loans, which would bankrupt you personally and likely send you to prison for trading while insolvent." "You want my company?" Bennett whispered. "My life's work. It's not your life's work, Bennett. It's ours. And since you fired me from the marriage, I'm firing you from the company." She pointed to the document. "Sign it, or I release the audit report that shows you've been using company funds to pay for Chloe's apartment in the city. That's embezzlement, Bennett. Prison time." Bennett looked at the pen. He looked at Victoria. He thought about Chloe waiting in the limo. He thought about the magazine covers. He thought about his pride. Then he looked at Victoria's eyes. He saw no mercy there. He saw only the cold, hard math of a liquidation sale. "You planned this," he hissed. "You planned this whole thing." "I prepared for it," Victoria corrected. "I hoped I would never have to use it. But you forced my hand." Bennett picked up the pen. His hand shook so badly he could barely hold it. "I'll get you back for this," he muttered. "No, you won't," Victoria said. "Because you're not smart enough." Bennett signed. The elevator ride down to the lobby was silent, but it was the silence of a bomb that had already detonated. Bennett leaned against the mirrored wall. His tie loosened his face pale. He looked less like a titan of industry and more like a man who had just been mugged. When the doors opened, he walked out into the cold New York air. The limousine was still there. The driver held the door open. Inside, Chloe was sipping a latte, scrolling through Instagram. She looked up, expecting a victory lap. She saw a funeral procession of one. "Well?" she asked, putting her phone down. "Did you fix it? Is the merger back on?" Bennett sank into the seat. He didn't look at her. "Drive," he told the driver. "Where to, sir?" "The hotel, the Carlyle." "Bennett." Chloe poked his arm. "Talk to me. What happened up there?" Bennett turned to her. He looked at the emerald dress, the flawless makeup, the hungry eyes. He suddenly felt very, very tired. "I'm out," he said raspily. "Out." "What does that mean? Out. I resigned. I signed the papers. Victoria. She owns the debt. She owns the voting bloc. She forced me out, Chloe. I'm not the CEO anymore." Chloe stared at him. Her mouth opened slightly. You quit. You just gave her the company. What about the Kincaid deal? What about the bonus?" "There is no bonus," Bennett snapped. "It's over. I barely kept my liquid assets. I have the trust fund for the kids, which we don't have, and my personal savings. But the stock options, the golden parachute, gone. She stripped it all." Chloe sat back. The calculation in her eyes was instant. It was like watching a computer reboot. She wasn't looking at her boyfriend anymore. She was looking at a liability. "So," Chloe said slowly, "you're unemployed, and your wife controls your bank accounts." "Ex-wife," Bennett corrected. "And she doesn't control my personal accounts. Just the big money, the leverage." "Stop the car," Chloe said. Bennett frowned. "What?" "Driver, stop the car," Chloe yelled. The limo pulled over to the curb on Madison Avenue. "I can't do this, Bennett," Chloe said, grabbing her Chanel bag. "I can't deal with this drama. I signed up for the power couple life. I didn't sign up to be the nursemaid for a washed-up executive who got outsmarted by a housewife." "Chloe." Bennett reached for her hand. "We're in this together. We can rebuild. I have ideas. You have nothing," Chloe hissed, pulling her hand away. "You just told me you have nothing. Do you know how embarrassing this is going to be? Twitter is already laughing at you. I have a brand to protect." She opened the door. "Chloe, it's Christmas," Bennett pleaded. "Happy holidays, Bennett," she said. She stepped out onto the sidewalk, slammed the heavy door, and hailed a yellow cab, without looking back. Bennett sat alone in the massive car. He watched the cab merge into traffic. He laughed. It was a dry, broken sound. "Driver," he said, "take me to the bar. Any bar." 3 hours later, Bennett was sitting in a dark booth at a dive bar in Hell's Kitchen, nursing a whiskey. He wasn't sad anymore. He was angry. The shock had worn off, replaced by a burning, toxic humiliation. Victoria had played him. She had sat in the background for years, pretending to be the dutiful wife, all while holding a knife to his throat. He pulled out his phone. He had missed calls from James Kincaid, from his PR team, from his mother. He ignored them all. He scrolled through his contacts until he found a name he hadn't used in years. Mitch the Hatchet Reynolds. Mitch was a corporate fixer, a PR crisis manager who specialized in scorched earth tactics. If you wanted to salvage a reputation, you hired a firm. If you wanted to destroy someone else's, you hired Mitch. Bennett hit dial. "Smith." Mitch's gravelly voice answered. "I saw the news. Stock dropped 12% this morning. Rough Christmas. I want to kill the company, Bennett said. He didn't slur his words. He was deadly serious. Excuse me. If I can't have it, she can't either, Bennett said, gripping the phone. Victoria wants to play CEO fine. Let's see how she handles a scandal. I want you to leak everything, Mitch. The failed prototypes we buried in 2021. The harassment suits we settled out of court. The safety data on the new battery cells that we fudged. There was a long silence on the other end. Bennett, Mitch said slowly, that's suicide. You're the one who signed off on those things. You'll implicate yourself. I don't care, Bennett shouted, causing the bartender to look over. He lowered his voice. I'll say I was coerced. I'll say the board forced me. I'll say Victoria was the shadow director pulling the strings the whole time. Just burn it down, Mitch. Leak it to the Wall Street Journal. Leak it to TechCrunch. I want Smith Dynamics to be radioactive by New Year's Day. It'll cost you, Mitch said. High risk implies high fee. I'll wire you 50,000 now. Another 50 when the stock hits zero. Done, Mitch said. Check your email for the encrypted Dropbox. Send me the files. Bennett hung up. He smiled. It was a cruel, ugly smile. He might have lost the throne, but he could still burn the kingdom. The next morning, the headlines were catastrophic. Smith Dynamics cover-up, leaked memos, reveal battery fire risks. Former CEO claims shadow director forced unsafe product launches. The stock market opened and Smith Dynamics plummeted. It didn't just drop, it crashed. Within an hour, the company had lost 40% of its value. In the Helios Trust boardroom, the mood was tense. The phones were ringing off the hook. David, the young analyst, was pacing. It's a bloodbath, Victoria. Bennett is torching the place. He's releasing confidential safety data. The SEC is going to be swarming us by lunch. Victoria sat at the head of the table sipping tea. She looked remarkably calm for a woman whose net worth was evaporating by the second. He's using Mitch Reynolds, Silas said, walking into the room with a tablet. We traced the IP of the leak. It went through a server farm in Belarus, but the payment trail leads back to a shell company Reynolds uses. Predictable, Victoria said. Bennett always lashes out when he's cornered. He thinks he's burning the house down with me inside. Well, it's working, David yelled. The Kincaid deal is dead for sure now. No one buys a company under federal investigation. We're going to lose everything. Victoria set her tea down. David, sit down. Breathe. She stood up and walked to the window. Bennett thinks he knows where the bodies are buried because he put them there, she said. But he forgot one thing. She turned to the group. He forgot that I was the one who organized the filing cabinets. Victoria looked at Silas. Did you secure the dead man's switch? Yes, ma'am. Silas nodded. It's ready to deploy. Good, Victoria said. Set up a press conference. Noon, today, in the lobby of Smith Tower. I'm going to address the leaks personally. Are you sure? The former SEC regulator asked. Going out there now is dangerous. The press is out for blood. I'm counting on it, Victoria said. At noon, the lobby of Smith Tower was a zoo. Cameras from every major network were jostling for position. Bennett was watching from his hotel room, TV, a bottle of champagne open on the table. Go on, Tory. He sneered at the screen. Try to talk your way out of battery fires. On the screen, Victoria walked up to the podium. She wore a simple black dress, no jewelry. She looked solemn, trustworthy, and incredibly sad. Ladies and gentlemen, she began. The documents released today are disturbing. They paint a picture of a company that prioritized profit over safety. A company that lost its moral compass. She paused, looking directly into the camera. My ex-husband, Bennett Smith, has claimed that he was forced into these decisions by a shadow director. He claims he is a whistleblower. Victoria reached under the podium and pulled out a thick binder. However, she continued, her voice gaining steel, I believe in radical transparency. What Mr. Smith did not release to the press, and what I am releasing right now, are the internal audio logs from the executive boardroom. Bennett froze in his hotel room. The champagne glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. The audio logs. He had installed a voice-activated recording system in his office 3 years ago to record meetings with competitors to get dirt on them. He had forgotten it recorded everything. On the TV, Victoria pressed a button on a laptop connected to the PA system. Bennett's voice boomed through the lobby speakers, crisp and clear. I don't care if the battery heats up, Dave. Just ship it. We need to hit the Q3 targets or the bonus pool dries up. If it catches fire, we'll settle. It's cheaper to pay the lawsuits than to delay the launch. The press corps gasped. Victoria played another clip. Victoria is asking questions again about the safety report. I need you to forge the stress test results, Arthur. Make it look green. If she finds out we're failing, she'll cut the funding. Keep her in the dark. She's just the bank account. Bennett stared at the TV, horror washing over him. It wasn't just evidence of negligence. It was evidence of fraud, conspiracy, and his explicit intent to deceive Victoria. Victoria stopped the recording. As you can hear, Victoria said, I was not a shadow director. I was the victim of a sophisticated fraud orchestrated by Bennett Smith and his legal counsel. When I discovered the truth this Christmas, I took immediate action to remove him from the company. She looked straight into the camera lens. I am announcing today a full recall of all affected products. The Helios Trust will be funding this recall personally. We are also cooperating fully with the DOJ. And regarding Mr. Smith, she paused. We have just filed a civil suit for damages, and we have handed these recordings over to the district attorney. Bennett, if you are watching, don't leave town. The screen cut to black. Bennett sat in the hotel room. His phone started ringing. It wasn't the press. It was the FBI. The courtroom smelled of floor wax, wet wool, and old paper, a distinct, sterile scent that Victoria Vance would forever associate with the end of an era. It was exactly 1 year since the Christmas Eve party in Aspen. Outside the federal courthouse in Lower Manhattan, a blizzard was raging, burying the city in a foot of white powder. The wind howled against the limestone exterior, but inside courtroom 4, the air was stiflingly hot and dead silent. Victoria sat in the back row of the gallery, almost invisible. She wore a coat the color of dried blood, high-collared and severe, and oversized sunglasses, though there was no sun to block. She wasn't there to testify. Her part in this tragedy had been played months ago, when she handed the encryption keys and the audio hard drives to the district attorney. She was just there to witness the final act, to see the balance sheet finally zero out. Bennett Smith stood before the judge. To anyone else, he might have looked the same, tall, broad-shouldered, retaining the ghost of his former handsomeness. But Victoria knew the details. She saw that the bespoke Italian suits were gone, replaced by a rumpled grey jacket that pulled tight across his shoulders and looked like it had been bought off the rack at a department store. He had lost weight, his neck thin inside the collar, and he had gained a heaviness in his posture that spoke of sleepless nights, Xanax dependency, and endless interrogations. His defense attorney, a court-appointed lawyer who looked barely out of law school, was shuffling papers nervously. Arthur Penhaligon was nowhere to be seen. The Bulldog lawyer was currently awaiting his own trial in a minimum security facility in Connecticut, having turned state's witness against Bennett in a desperate, failed plea deal to save his license. "Mr. Smith," the judge said, peering over her spectacles. She was a stern woman with grey hair and zero patience for white-collar theatrics. "You have been found guilty on 3 counts of wire fraud, 2 counts of securities fraud, and 1 count of embezzlement. The evidence presented, specifically the audio recordings from your own office, demonstrates a clear, willful, and frankly arrogant intent to deceive your investors, your board, and the public. And the Asul." Bennett didn't look up. He was staring at his hands, specifically at the ring finger, where a platinum band used to sit. The skin there was pale, a permanent tan line marking the absence of the marriage he had discarded. "Do you have anything to say before sentencing?" the judge asked. Bennett slowly turned his head. He didn't look at the judge. He didn't look at the jury box, which was now empty. He scanned the gallery, ignoring the sketch artists and the few reporters who had braved the storm. His eyes locked onto the back row. He saw her. For a moment, the old fire sparked in his eyes. A flash of the arrogance that had built an empire and destroyed a life. He straightened his tie, a reflex from a life that no longer existed, and jutted his chin out. "I did what I had to do," Bennett said, his voice raspy but audible in the silent room. "Business is war, Your Honor. Casualties are expected. I built that company. I made those people rich. They're only angry because I got caught." "Then you will find," the judge said, her voice dripping with dry disdain, "that the law is the peace treaty you violated. And you are not a General Mr. Smith. You are a casualty." She banged the gavel. The sound was like a gunshot. 5 years in a federal penitentiary. Restitution to be paid to the shareholders of Smith Dynamics, now Vance Helios, in the amount of $50 million. You are remanded to custody immediately. As the bailiffs moved in, the heavy metallic clink of handcuffs echoed through the room. Bennett didn't fight. He didn't struggle. But as they led him away toward the side door, he turned one last time toward Victoria. He didn't scream. He didn't curse. He just mouthed 2 words, his expression a mix of hatred and begrudging respect. "You won." Victoria didn't smile. She didn't nod. She simply stood up, buttoned her coat, and walked out of the courtroom before they even closed the door behind him. 2 days later, Victoria stood on the balcony of the Aspen Chalet. The mountains were breathtaking, wrapped in a silence so profound it felt holy. She had repurchased the property from the liquidation auction using her dividends from the Q3 earnings. It was the only sentimental indulgence she had allowed herself. But she had exorcised the ghosts. The furniture Bennett chose was gone. The art he pretended to understand, gaudy, modern pieces meant to impress guests, was sold. The staff who had been loyal to him were replaced. The chalet was quiet, but it was a warm quiet. It wasn't the silence of a tomb, but the silence of a blank canvas. "Ma'am." Victoria turned. Silas stood in the doorway. He was wearing a ridiculous Christmas sweater with a pixelated reindeer on it, a gag gift from the administrative team that he felt obligated to wear. It clashed horribly with his stern bodyguard demeanor. "The helicopter is inbound," Silas said, checking his watch. "The board is arriving in 20 minutes for the retreat." "Thank you, Silas," Victoria said, turning back to the view. "Is everything prepared? The strategy deck is loaded. The champagne is on ice, Pole Roger 2008, and Ms. De Winter is on line 1. Victoria raised an eyebrow, a small smile playing on her lips. "Chloe." "She's been calling the main line all morning," Silas said, fighting a smirk. "Apparently the modeling agency dropped her after the scandal broke. No one wants the face of corporate negligence selling perfume. She's asking if the spousal support payments you authorized for Bennett could be redirected, considering she was his common-law partner for 3 weeks. Victoria laughed. It was a genuine, full-throated sound that echoed off the timber beams. It felt good to laugh. "Tell her," Victoria said, wiping a tear of mirth from her eye, "that the position of charity case has been filled by the United States government. But if she needs work, I hear the prison cafeteria is hiring. Bennett might appreciate a familiar face serving him slop." Silas chuckled deeply. "I'll relay the message with my usual tact." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Victoria, yes. Merry Christmas." Victoria looked out at the snow-covered mountains. She thought about the red envelope Bennett had handed her exactly a year ago, in this very room. She thought about the fear she had felt, the hollow ache of rejection, the feeling of being discarded like an old wrapper. It felt like a memory from someone else's life. A movie she had watched a long time ago. She wasn't a wife anymore. She wasn't a victim. She wasn't an accessory. She was the chairwoman of a Fortune 500 company. She was a titan of industry. And most importantly, she was free. She touched the cool glass of the window, seeing her reflection. She didn't look tired. She looked ready. "Merry Christmas, Silas," she whispered. She turned her back on the view and walked into the living room, where a new fire was roaring in the hearth. On the table lay a new set of blueprints, Project Phoenix, a renewable energy initiative that would revolutionize the grid. Bennett had built a company on hype, debt, and lies. She was going to build a legacy on power and light. The helicopter blades thumped in the distance, announcing the arrival of her team. Her people. Victoria Smith No. Victoria Vance straightened her blazer, checked her reflection in the mirror, and smiled. The meeting was called to order. And so the ledger is balanced. Bennett Smith traded his penthouse for a prison cell, and Victoria Vance traded a broken heart for a business empire. It's a brutal reminder that in the game of life and high finance, the most dangerous person in the room isn't the one shouting orders. It's the one quietly taking notes. Victoria didn't just survive. She rewrote the rules of the game. She proved that dignity is an asset that never depreciates, and revenge, when calculated correctly, yields the highest return on investment. Now I have to ask you, did Bennett get off too easy with 5 years? Or was watching his ex-wife take over his entire life the real punishment? I want to hear your verdict. Drop a comment below with Team Victoria if you think she's the ultimate boss, or Team Bennett if you think, well, actually, if you're Team Bennett, maybe keep that to yourself. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button. It helps us fund our own hostile takeovers of the YouTube algorithm. Make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you don't miss our next saga of betrayal money and karma. I'll see you in the next video. Until then, check your blind trusts and be nice to your spouse. You never know who really owns the company.